Well, hello and welcome. It's the Brian Hornback Experience. This is episode 103. And I've got another candidate that's running in the November 8th state general election. We have a state and federal general election coming up. November 8th. Early vote starts Wednesday, October 19th. Runs through Thursday, November the 3rd. Again, I think I messed this up on episode 101. I said it was the first Tuesday of November. It's not. It's always the second Tuesday of November. I got messed up because the state primary is always the first Thursday of August. Yeah, okay. I admit I made one mistake in the podcast. But anyway, we have a candidate running for state senate in District 7, and he is the Democrat candidate, Bryan Langan. Brian, how are you?
Doing pretty good. Thanks for having me on, Brian.
Hopefully I pronounced your last name right. So,
Yeah, great.
Anyway, so you are running. You've just to kind of introduce folks to you. You are running for State Senate District 7, which encompasses encompasses all of Knox County. Basically, goes from just this side of Farragut, goes through Farragut, Hardin Valley, Carnes, a little bit of Powell, and then into Knoxville, right? That's kind of the state senate district.
Yeah, it kind of runs from the county line in Farragut. So pretty much all of Farragut is almost all of it, I think, is now in this district as the new redistricting. It kind of runs along 40 a little bit north, part of Hardin Valley, Carnes area, some of kind of the West Hills, Middlebrook area.
Yep.
Then cuts down through campus, cuts down through campus, and comes up through Knoxville, then winds out up into Powell.
Yep.
So, yeah, fairly large district.
So you came to Knoxville to attend the University of Tennessee, and you decided to stay here, and you've been here for a couple of decades, right?
Yep. Yeah, about 22 years.
Nice.
Yeah.
And
so I've been here for a while.
And you're married, and you've got an 8-year-old. How? Our kids are all raised now, so you got to enjoy those young years while you can, because one day you wake up and they're in their 30s and 20s. So. But
it passes quickly.
Yep. So obviously there's some issues we're going to talk about, but did you really think that you would wind up running for public office at some point? I mean, is this something that you always kind of thought, I might have an interest in politics, or did you just wake up one day and say, I'm not happy with the way things are going, I'm going to offer myself as a candidate?
Kind of. I never really thought, I joke about I sort of really thought for office that, I worked my life that seemed to be the, I get involved, I plan on anything. It was all, there were a lot of opposes. So I said, consider running if there was a race that you all would be interested in having me run for.
Right.
And one thing led to another, and all of a sudden, here I am.
There you go. So, we'll just go through some of the things that are on your website. By the way, folks can find your website at Langan, LANGAN, 4TN.com. And then also, folks can search on Facebook for Langan for Tennessee Senate District 7. And on Twitter, it's Brian, BRYAN, LANGANTN. But one of the issues one of the first things that's on your website is support workers and their rights to organize.
Yes.
Kind of talk about that, and is the fact that the Starbucks in Knoxville, is that part of, was that part of your interest in that, or have you just always been interested in workers and their ability to organize?
There was no one thing. It's something I've personally never worked for a union.
Right.
There have been many situations where I would have liked to have had a union, particularly being in restaurants and that sort of thing. There's not really a union sort of thing. So when it comes to, making sure your schedule is 2 weeks out in advance, you can plan to have a life and stuff like that. I understand the need for that collective bargaining and that collective power, because when you're doing it against somebody who pays your wages and helps put food on your family and everything, you don't really have a lot of leverage. And, unions are part of why we have 40-hour work weeks and overtime and weekends and paid vacation. There is a lot of good that unions have done for the American workers. So it's one of those things that I think if the employees decide they want to do that, they should have that right to organize.
Sure. Well, and we're going to have I guess at the same time that you'll be on the ballot, we've got the state legislature has a constitutional amendment. I think it's Amendment 1. I haven't even, there's going to be 4 amendments on there, but one of them is to somehow put into the state constitution the right to work, which is basically the totally, I guess, obviously you still have the ability to organize, but
yes,
right
but it undermines the power
right,
of unions.
Right. So,
and that is Amendment number 1. So I would suggest to anybody listening, please vote no on 1.
Right.
On November 8th.
Yep.
So yeah.
All right.
But that is on the ballot.
So then another thing you talk about is defend privacy and bodily autonomy. Kind of talk about what your thoughts are there.
Okay, so this kind of goes back to the abortion ban and women's rights.
Right.
That is particularly under attack right now.
Right.
Part of it goes to I do have a daughter.
Right.
And for me right now, they've essentially said that my daughter doesn't have as much rights to her body and to what happens with her body as like her cousin. They have made no exceptions for rape or incest, or really even in the case of the mother's life being at risk. What they have is basically a very narrow exception where the burden of proof is on the woman to prove that her life was at risk, and it makes it very complicated for doctors even considering performing the procedure. And that goes to where the right to privacy, basically underpinning law, is a right to privacy law, which then gets into gay marriage and just basically our individual rights to some privacy and freedom in our own lives.
Right. Well, we're recording this. We're recording this on August 22nd. The only reason I really mentioned that is that with the Supreme Court decision in June, Tennessee is just a few days away from being a totally no abortion state.
Yes.
I'm not sure what state close to us will allow that.
I think Virginia is one of the closest ones, because I was reading an article about Bristol, Tennessee, and about the shared border.
Right.
And I want to say it's legal in Bristol, Virginia, but not in Bristol, Tennessee.
Okay. So obviously, and one thing that I was talking with another candidate about, and I've talked to folks on both sides of the aisle. Some folks on my side of the aisle. I mean, there's no secret that I'm a Republican, but I believe in talking to everybody and giving everybody a shot, because I want my readers and my listeners to be able to make informed decisions. So, but I talked to some people and I said, we see a lot of voter apathy, but a lot of things that will compel people to vote is anger. And if people think that this decision by the Supreme Court, if that will bring more people to vote in November or less people to vote. Obviously I have my opinion, other folks have their opinions. I've gotten opinions on both sides, but you think this decision will get more people to vote in November?
I think right now trends are showing that it is definitely motivating some people.
Right.
It does seem to be a motivating factor, because you are taking away a right that most of us, myself included, have known our entire lives.
Right.
It's been something that's been there our entire lives, and you're taking it right away.
Yeah, I'm 50. I'm 56, and Roe has been in existence for 50 years. So, I don't remember what happened the first 6 years of my life. So.
Yeah. So I'm 42. So it's been my entire life. So it's just something that I've known for that, and I trust the women and the doctors of Tennessee to make those decisions. And I'm afraid we're about to walk into the situation where we have, I think it was the woman in Louisiana that's now being forced to carry a child without a skull that has no chance of survival to term. We're going to run into issues with ectopic pregnancies and stuff like that, and we're going to start seeing that here in Tennessee soon.
Right.
and it feels like it's just trauma on top of trauma on top of trauma for the women of Tennessee,
Right.
especially when you take into account the rape or incest. So if a woman is raped, you have the trauma of the rape, then you're going to have to carry that child for full term and experience everything that goes along with being pregnant on the body, and then have the trauma of having to make the decision of whether or not to give that child up or keep that child.
Right.
So it just seems like a very poorly thought out bill.
Right. Moving on to education, you talk about supporting teachers and fully funding our public schools. Obviously, the legislature has spent a lot of time, and particularly our current governor, who's up for re-election, has spent a considerable amount of time. The previous governor spent a lot of time on getting lottery money to help pay for post-secondary education, but this governor has been very much involved in the private and the charter schools. The whole BEP plan, which they supposedly, they did change it some last year to the Ezra. Supposedly that's going to help get funding, whereas Knox County was not getting a good proportional share of the dollars per student. Supposedly that's been adjusted some, but we see more and more charter schools, and then you got the whole Larry Orange situation. So kind of talk about your thoughts on teachers, and in particular fully funding the public schools, and then you can tie into that the charter and all that other stuff.
Okay, so I guess with our public schools right now, you talked about the BEP, which I don't believe had been updated since '92.
Right. So, it was created. It was created in '92, and then it was never adjusted until last year. So
they didn't adjust for any sort of technological changes in education and those sorts of things, and just increased costs and that. So we've been underfunding our public schools for years. I don't disagree with them that we need to increase funding. I just not sure TISA is really the way to do it. It seems to be kind of like the abortion ban, kind of short thought as far as the long-term consequences and issues with it. Charter schools, that is taking public money and putting into a school run by a private entity. It is moving public funds to private entities. It goes to, as far as funding our schools, I think we need to make sure we're paying our teachers competitively for the area so that we retain teachers. We need to reduce kind of the hostile language around education right now, because it's making it hard for teachers to want to stay in the classrooms. So not only do we need to pay them better, we need to, I think, remember our respect for our teachers. I am a product of public schools, and I had some amazing teachers. So I think we need to take care of them, and not only just the teachers, but also the staff. Like our school staff, their starting hourly is like $10 an hour. I think it's $10.49 now in Knox County. But a staff across the board in general needs to have better funding and improving our facilities so that we provide a good education to prepare our kids for the future so that they can be productive members of society. With charters, we've seen really very questionable record of success here in Tennessee. And with the Hillsdale thing and all, I'm not really confident that it's going to get any better other than just taking some money, and they don't have to meet all the same requirements either. So it's hard for me to justify giving them public funds when they're not held to the same requirements as far as programs like music and certain sports and stuff that they have, art programs and those things. The biggest thing that bothers me with TISA is the overstepping of local authority. That might be when it comes to whether or not a charter school will be in your district, and this creation of a state board that is appointed by the governor, the Speaker of the House, and the Speaker of the Senate to overrule local authority. That really is one of the big things about TISA that bothers me as well. And then beyond that, we have, a fiscal cliff that's potential to happen by about 2027 and leave us somewhere in the vicinity of $194 million short that we passed on to counties, more than likely resulting in property tax increases across the state. We have this TN Ready thing going right now with the single test that could cause your third grader to get held back. All of these seem like kind of short-sighted rather than investing in better reading programs and investing in our school, short-sighted attempted fixes. And then we also have the whole book banning bill that was passed, where now teachers have an even larger burden, having to go through and catalog all their books, and then that gets sent to another state board that can say that these books are banned.
Yeah, I was looking on social media last night, and I guess I didn't realize. I mean, when they passed that law that all teachers have to catalog all their books if there's a request, the amount of time that would take to catalog a book, and then there was I saw a list last night of some books that I guess are banned now, and some books that I've read that I'm like, well, that's interesting. I mean, The Kite Runner, I don't really get that, but it's even as somebody on the other side of the aisle, I'm not particularly fond of banning books. One of the greatest things about our country is that I have enjoyed in 17 years of having a political blog, which started as a hobby, and it's still a hobby because it's not a full-time job, but is the fact that we have free speech, and whether I agree with that free speech or not, it's still free speech. If I don't know, I mean, I understand. I was on the school board 20 years ago. I mean, I served a term on the school board. I get it, that there's some content that maybe could be questionable, but at the same time, I think it's like anything. A lot of things go a little too far sometimes.
Yeah, and as a parent, it's like I kind of watch what my daughter reads. I pay attention to it, and that I feel like is my job as a parent, and to explain to her when she has questions, like it is a little bit of this type of content or anything, and I'm okay with that. Like
Right.
That's what I accepted as being a parent.
I mean, every year, all three of my kids went through Farragut High School, and every summer, I would get the list, and I read whatever they read. That's why I read The Kite Runner one year. But that's neither here nor there. So talk about. Okay, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, you just mentioned something else about that. And that's something else that I think we should be able to do, is to actually fully fund our schools where students have the supplies they need.
Oh, yeah.
Parents aren't getting this 50-page list or 50-item list of things for the classroom, or 25-item list that you get, where we're actually funding for them to have paper and crayons and those sorts of things in the schools. I mean, the basics. And even I would endorse a meal. That one lunch meal during the day, make sure every student in the state gets at least one decent meal a day.
Well, I think for the last couple of years, because of the extra COVID money, they've been doing that. But I think this year they've gone back to charging.
They did. There was an attempt to expand it and make it permanent, and it was blocked.
Wow.
By the supermajority this year.
Right.
So yeah.
Yeah.
But there was an attempt at it.
So let's talk about cannabis. I mean, it's become an issue that's not just a partisan issue anymore. It's an issue that's got pretty good support on both sides of the aisle. I know one of the main supporters of reforming, legalizing, and taxing cannabis is one of the leaders on the House side of the Republican supermajority. But kind of talk about your thoughts on that, and if that obviously reform. I guess you're talking about potentially decriminalizing it, making it legal, and then taxing it. So kind of talk about your thoughts there.
Yep, that is pretty much exactly what I'm talking about.
Right.
Legalizing it, kind of in the form of other states. When we do legalize it, I want to make sure that we don't make it to the point where small business owners and small individual entrepreneurs don't have a way to actually get the buy-in, be it permits or whatever. Because you see in some other states where they made the buy-in so high that basically became completely run by corporations and cut out the smaller, individuals that ran farms and stuff like that.
Right.
Made it more difficult for them to get. So I do want to make sure that when we do it, that it is somewhat accessible to even smaller operations. Because I think it has the potential to produce a tax base for which we can fund our public schools and potentially some further infrastructure in our state. I'm just tired of seeing Tennesseans criminalized for stuff that is perfectly legal for other Americans.
Right.
That other Americans have that freedom. It also generally reduces opiate requirements, and there was a study that's showing with Medicaid, which I would like to expand, because we're leaving something like 330,000 Tennesseans behind by not expanding that and taking that free money. And in areas where cannabis had been legalized and they had Medicaid, they showed that actually saved money on the Medicaid programs because people took less opiates. So there were less prescriptions for opiates, and actually saved the Medicaid program some money to be able to expand and serve more people in other areas.
Well, and there was a candidate back in the primary that I had on the podcast that said, and I've not been able. Normally, when somebody tells me something, I use the whole trust but verify. I've not been able to find that he was wrong yet, but he said that there's not been one incident where someone died because of an overdose of cannabis.
Yep.
And so, I think that's an interesting statistic that I'm open to, because
Yes.
really the scourge on our society has been the opioid and now the fentanyl curse that's costing lots of folks' lives. And at the same time, we're bringing them back with Narcan, but, the cost of the Narcan is exponential, that we could wind up using that money for something else, so.
Yes. And fentanyl is particularly bad because it's so
lethal.
deadly in small doses.
Right.
So yeah, sorry, I kind of lost track, but I agree. I think we should legalize this. Not only would that produce small business opportunities for shops to open, it also would help our farmers by giving them another cash crop to produce that would, I suspect, grow very well here in Tennessee. And like I said, use that tax base and that to make some of the best schools in the nation, public school system in the nation here in Tennessee, and actually truly prepare as many Tennessee kids for a productive future.
Right. You talked about the traffic infrastructure. They passed a gas tax a few years ago to help pay for those. If you were to give the state and the legislature a grade on how they've done so far with the money that they've gotten, have you thought about a letter grade that you would give them?
Honestly, I have not.
Right.
But as someone who has lived in South Carolina and Pennsylvania, as bad as our roads can get, they're still pretty good compared to some of those.
Right. Well, it is interesting when you Tennessee for the most part has been pretty good. I mean, we got some bridges that obviously need to be replaced and repaired, obviously. But it's funny when you cross state lines. You cross into you can always tell a difference, and sometimes Tennessee's better, and because we touch so many different states. But it's just obviously Knoxville's been, I guess, because we have 3 state senate districts in Knox County. We've gotten a better proportion, and we have a lot of traffic that moves through Knoxville because of the interstate system. So
yeah, we also are one of the heaviest traveled as far as truck traffic,
right,
semi-truck trailer traffic goes. So we have a lot of heavy loads on our roads, particularly here in Knoxville and Knox County.
Right.
So that would be why we probably get some extra. Now, I'm not necessarily big on why they passed that to increase gas taxes on everyone who got the tax breaks as a result of the Improve Act, and the fact that it got dispersed to all Tennesseans to cover that, which places a heavier burden on the poorer people in Tennessee. So while I do think TDOT does a fairly good job, I'm not necessarily happy with how that was negotiated, how that tax act, the Improve Act came into being.
Right. Well, we're getting getting close to the 25-minute mark. So a couple of things we might get you back on here at a future date. The The only couple things that we didn't really talk about was keeping guns out of the hands of criminals, domestic abusers, and mentally unwell. And then the other thing that I would love to hear your thoughts on it as a relatively young father and husband is the housing crisis that we supposedly have in Knox County. I'm not 100% convinced on that one yet, but we'll save that for another day. But I do want folks to know that they can go to Langan with the number 4tn.com, search Facebook Langan for Tennessee Senate District 7, and Twitter Bryan BRYAN LANGANTN on Twitter. But I want to give you the next couple of 3 minutes to talk to people about October 19th through the November 3rd, and then also on Tuesday, November 8th, and let you finish out with whatever you want to say and ask everybody for their votes. And I thank you for being on the Brian Hornback Experience.
All right. Well, I appreciate you having me on. I would be glad to come out back and talk to you about gun control, housing, and one of my kind of pet projects, our waterways.
Oh, yeah.
So just a quick thing on that. So from 2010 to 2020, per the Tennessee Department of Water Resources, we went from 32.4% of our waterways being impaired to 55.4%.
Wow.
In Knox County, we have 39 impaired waterways. 20 of those are due to E. coli. A lot of this is the result of deregulation bills passed through the Senate, like SB 899 and SB 1830, where they chose corporations and developers over our community and our water. So anyway, I would love to talk to you all about some of that.
Oh, yeah.
But my main goal here is basically I want to focus on fixing problems that actually affect and can benefit Tennesseans. That's really what my focus of running for is kind of get through all the fog of whatever's, snappy today, that sort of thing, but actually focus on the problems that will help and benefit as many Tennesseans as possible. So that's why I'm running. Thank you so much for having me on your show.
Oh, absolutely. And I did forget to say this is your actual first interview. So I appreciate you. Accepting my offer to be on here, and I hope it wasn't too painful. And I hope that any interviews you have will be. I hope whatever they are. I hope this one was I hope this is the best one you've had. So whatever I'm trying to say.
The absolute best one I've had
so far. Absolutely. All right, Brian. Good luck to you, and I'm sure. And I do want to get you.
Sorry.
Oh no, you're
I think
good.
I started breaking up for a second.
Yeah. Now, I do want to get you back, and we'll talk about the waterways at some point, and maybe the housing also. So,
Okay.
Good luck to you, and I'm sure we'll see you out on the campaign trail.
Sounds good. I appreciate it.
All right. Thanks, Brian.
Bye.